Good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll get started. My name is Satish Srinivasan from Scotland. I'll be moderating this session. So welcome to this Haag-Streit session on new frontiers in IOL prediction for improved refractive outcomes. I'm delighted we've got a stellar collection of speakers here on the panel. So the first two talks will be covering on the new hardware device, which is called the iStar, which is the new anterior segment analyzer. And then Dr. Warren Hill and Dr. Abulafia will be talking to you about the new exciting software. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Dr. David Goldblum from Switzerland. He is the cataract and corneal head at the University of Basel. As he's got a flight to catch, we have got slightly altered our speakers lineup. So he's going to be speaking to us regarding the first clinical experience with the iStar device. Dr. Goldblum.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here, Haag-Streit. My financial disclosures are as follows. None of them relate to the work I'm presenting here, except for the Haag-Streit one. So, how did this start? I was introduced to Haag-Streit many, many years ago by the slit lamp. And about 14 years ago, we started on a journey where we developed some new machinery that one you certainly know is the LensStar. And hence, over the years, we had a really fruitful collaboration and some friendship developed. And about 2 years ago, they asked me again if we could not improve or make a new machinery. And that's actually what you can see here on the right. This is the prototype which Lucio, who you're going to hear later on, has delivered to our department 2 years ago. And that's what it looks now a day, which you can see at the booth. This is what has been later called the iStar 900. This is the new biometer, which we have tested, and I will give you some clinical data, some clinical insight, where we are standing now, what this device can do. So, the iStar 900 is an absolutely new biometer. It uses swept source technology. You will hear later from Lucio, the physicist of Haag-Streit, about the technology behind it. It includes everything you are used and know about the LensStar. It's a full equipped biometer, but additionally on top of that, it has a topography unit in it with anterior and posterior topographies. It visualizes the anterior segment fully. You can see what you're actually measuring, and it's a very, very easy machinery to use. It's I say a two-click machinery. I'll quickly show you later on. It actually is small. Like, if I can go back, doesn't matter. It has a very, what Haag-Streit calls a very small footprint. I say actually it's a very small floor place which it covers. We worked on it that actually even patients with wheelchair, because at the university clinic we get some more sick patients, actually can easily access the machinery and is easily measurable. So everything has been redone on this machinery. I quickly show you here how it is working. It's fully integrated into the iSuite. You click on the iStar 900. You have to click onto the monitor, center into the pupil, start below, you see, and then the rest goes automatically, completely. It centers into the cornea, into the pupil. It brings it into focus, and then takes the measurement. That's it, and moves the head, the OCT device, to the left eye, and then you start again. That's how you measure with that swept source device. So, what did we do? We started about 4 months ago with a clinical study where we compared the iStar, the new device, to the LensStar, which is nowadays, I would say, the gold star in optical biometry, to the Atlas anterior topography, still nowadays I think it is the gold standard, and to the Pentacam, high resolution for the posterior corneal measurements. Every patient was measured in duplicate, so we also measured, or we compared repeatability, reproducibility, and that's what I'm going to show you now. So far we have measured over 35 patients and healthy students as well. We present you here only the first 30 patients we analyzed so far, and what you can see is that axial length, let me quickly show you this graph. This is the zero difference in repeatability, and the dotted lines give you the number on the right, the plus minus deviation. So you see for axial length over whatever you have, 24 millimeters or more or less, there's an accuracy and repeatability of 50 micrometers, which is absolutely, or less than 50 micrometers, because it doesn't even touch it. This is a perfect repeatability, reproducibility. Same for CCT. If you look at 10 micrometers, so it's within 10 micrometers of repeatability. It's a really, really perfect device. Some deviations here, which will be worked out. If you look at the posterior keratometries and astigmatism, absolutely perfect within less than 10 diopters, within less than 10 degrees, less than half a diopter. So perfect repeatability of this device. If you compare with the other devices, not the repeatability, but the direct comparison of the measurements, it's again the same thing. You see actually axial length compared eye star to lens star doesn't diverge very much. It is, as I said, a perfect biometer in numbers. It gives you the accurate readings you're used to if you use the lens star. If you compare it to the pentacam, you look at the posterior K values, you look at the astigmatism, the axis, it outperforms, or it performs as well as the pentacam. So you have an all-in-one device here, which you can use, and you don't have actually to sit the patient from one device to the next device to the next device to have all these data. I show you what it looks like, the topographies. You can customize your printout. Here is a regular or almost regular astigmatism, anterior axial curvature. You see the pachymetry, you see the anterior floats, you see the posterior curvature, and it quickly gives you in a cataract patient or in a refractive patient all the readings in one go, in one measurement, in one machinery, which is really, really neat. I don't want to not show you the keratoconus patient we measured, for example. You can see here, this is an older keratoconus patient. She's stable. She had cross-linking on one eye. I don't remember if it was the right eye. And you can see it. This is what you are used to if you compare it to the Atlas or if you compare it to the Pentacam. Some might say we measure here on a 7.5 millimeter diameter. It could be enlarged. Lucio will talk about it later on, I think. But you can see, you find everything what you're used. You can see it the same way you're used in the Pentacam. You have the anterior deviations. Everything you see, you're used to in your devices. Additionally, this device is an imaging device. You have a full eye imaging with this swept source OCT. You see from the angle to the angle, the whole cornea, anterior chamber. You see clearly the oops, sorry. Can we go back one, please?
Other mouse. Right.
The other mouse button. Yes, thank you. So you can clearly see the anterior lens, capsule, nucleus, and very sharp as well, the posterior capsule up to the retina. You have a complete section of the eye, a cross-section of the eye. You can determine the retina. Fovea is not clearly determinable, but since the patient fixates into the laser, it can't be very much off. Maybe Lucy will talk about more how much off it could be theoretically, but this will not make anything clinically relevant. You can see pseudophakic IOLs. You see the following posterior of the iris. You see the angle. Intacs here, corneal ring segments are visualizable. You see again a pseudophakic patient with some vitreous densities. A phakic artisan vari-size IOL in front of the phakic lens. You can see here, you see a patient who had DMAC. In the brochure, you will see him or her actually 2 days after DMAC. This is the bullous keratopathies. You see the irregularity on the posterior part. You see actually the thickness. And this is everything you can visualize and image with this device. If you look at the biometry, this is a young student, a patient, no cataract. So this is a a nucleus which has no cataract, obviously. Before, with the Lenster, it is an accurate device. If you make a clear lens extraction, you had to rely that the actual peaks of the posterior and the anterior capsule were at the right place. They are really at the right place. You can trust the machinery, but you never had certainty. Here, with that device, you actually have the certainty because you can compare the image. Anterior cornea, peak is at the right place. Posterior cornea, peak is at the right place. Anterior capsule, posterior capsule, everything is at the right place. You can actually check if the automatic detection of these peaks are at the correct place. And sometimes it is worth to redo this and go into it. And actually, you can here now compare the image to the actual measurements, the A to the B scan. Another example of a nice nuclear cataract with posterior cortical cataract, and you see actually also like the densities. It's the same thing as in the Lenster, and again you can actually see what the image looks like and compare if this is correct. We also have measured dense cataract. It goes easily and nicely through the dense cataracts, so there's no problem for dense cataracts at the moment. We measured them well. The device is performing really nicely for that. So far, what did I like about this new machinery? It's a precise, easy to use device. It's a biometer. It gives you additional information. I had to sit the patient usually to the atlas and to the pentacam if I had to do a toric IOL or if I wanted to check for irregularities. This is all a one-in-all device. So you really don't need the other devices anymore if once this is available on the market. Additionally, it gives you the images of the anterior chamber, of the cornea, of the lens. Possibly, we could actually measure curvatures of the anterior lens, of the posterior lens, tilts, and hence see if further formula improvements would be possible with these new data, which haven't been so far evaluated. So there's a lot of research going on still at the moment with that device and what is possible and if it is actually clinically relevant. But one thing which I'm going to give you as well, it's fully integrated into the iSuite IOL suite which you are used to. So you have all the formulas which you are used to. It looks the same. And this is what I presented last year. That's what it looks like. We actually have the 2 or 3 printouts. We compare in our cataract patients the Hill RBF. I like the Hill RBF to the Olsen. Actually, we have the old Holiday as well here underneath. That's an old slide. The Barrett for the torics for our technies. And that's how I actually get the results from our technicians when I see a patient with a cataract, what it looks like. And I presented this last year, and these are the data by Stephen Scoper. Sorry. How accurate the Hill RBF, so the new method of calculating the IOL power is. And I looked at this with Ron last year, and we said, okay, we are actually excellent overall. We are in normalized and in myopic eyes. We are really good. There's an extended version which actually increases the numbers. It's getting even better. But here, the hyperopics, these are still the difficult patients to calculate and to foresee. So I went back to our clinic and went into our database and had a look over the last 12 years. We've done about 12,000 cataract surgeries in the last 12 years. And we wanted to see what the most hyperopic eyes look like. So we have taken only the 31 diopter IOLs we implanted and above. So the group of 31 diopter IOLs and more, they have an average axial length of 20.64 millimeters. You've seen from 19 to 22. So this is really hyperopia as hyperopic as you can get in your patients. It's only 41 patients I found out of almost 12,000. So these patients I looked at, and I had their results, the postoperative refractions, and I wanted to see what would it have been if I had used different formulas over these last 12 years. And this is the last slides. Just let me explain to you. The dark red is the half diopter accuracy. So if you use, in these patients, Haig's formula, you would have within half a diopter accuracy of below 50%. If you had used the Hoffer Q in these patients, you would be above 50%. With the Holiday or the Barrett, surprisingly the Barrett as well, you would end up in a half a diopter accuracy in all, it's always the same patients, of less than 40%. If you had used, and if we had used the Hill RBF, we would have had an accuracy of 62%. Some of these patients would have been out of bounds actually, and still we would have had an accuracy of 62% in half a diopter. So concluding, this is nowadays for me, absolutely for all refractions, one of the best methods. Warren doesn't like to call it a formula because it's a method, and you should actually go and try this method to calculate your refraction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Just wanted to ask you, in the current Haag-Streit, we have the DCM mode or the dense cataract mode for getting the biometry for patients with dense cataracts or posterior subcapsulars. Is the technology different in the new iStar, or is it the same DCM software?
I think Lucio is going to talk about it. So this is technology. This is after me. We had to change it, but he will tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, I call upon Lucio Robledo. He heads the R&D department at Haag-Streit, and he has done most of his PhD and a postdoc work on optical coherence tomography. And I think he's one of the brains behind the iStar. So he's going to talk to us regarding the technology and the principles and the applications of this new anterior segment analyzer. Lucio.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Satish, for your kind introduction. And to correct, I'm actually not head of the R&D department, but I'm part of the team that developed the iStar, and to be honest, is still developing the iStar. And we think, since it is a little bit different to machines that you might have seen before, it's a good idea to give you a small introduction into the technology, why we chose this way, why we believe it's a good idea to choose this way. So let's see where we started from. These are two well-known devices by Haag-Streit. There's the slit lamp. It gives you very nice imaging of the anterior segment to allow for very flexible diagnostic. But of course, it is you need quite some training to use it in the right way. On the other hand, there's a device like the LensStar that takes quantitative measurements, very precise quantitative measurements. It is fairly easy to use, but it's highly specialized. It just gives numbers that are aimed for cataract surgery mainly. And so we wondered if one can bring these two approaches, that kind of complementary approaches, together and make something that offers new possibilities. In particular, a method that would combine anterior segment imaging with a quantitative measurement of all the refractive surfaces, and at the same time allow for biometry like axial eye length measurements and so on. So as you've seen before, we decided that OCT is the right approach to go here. Looking at the rapid technology improvements in the last year, I think that was a good decision, but it is not so straightforward. There are a couple of obstacles that we need to solve. I wanted to just highlight a few of them. So this is a plot, you might have seen this before, that shows the resolution of different ophthalmic imaging modalities. So the highest resolution, confocal imaging, then OCT. Scheimpflug is in the border between OCT and ultrasound. Ultrasound is the lowest resolution, but at the same time, the largest image depth imaging modality. And if you look at it in a different way, you see in the top left corner, you have very little detail. The resolution corresponds to the image depth, so you get more or less 1 point of information. While at the lower right, you get very high detailed information. That point that I illustrated there is 100,000 data points, basically. And most of the imaging modalities, they are below 1,000 points of image information. That's in part, it's a technological limitation, a really physical limitation. The confocal imaging, for instance, is limited by the wavelength of light, ultrasound by the wavelength of the ultrasound wave. Scheimpflug is limited by the geometry, since it goes at an oblique angle. OCT, this is just what I showed here. This is where typical retina OCT devices are located. And now if you look at our application, if we want to measure the entire eye by OCT, we want to do it at a resolution that allows to get the refractive properties of the eye. we need to go to this spot indicated in orange. So we really need to shift this green area. And fortunately, this is possible due to the swept source technology. By just using the right laser, you can almost, you're not really limited by the laser anymore. You're now limited by the data acquisition hardware. So it's a matter of price, but you are able to achieve full eye imaging. And this is an image that you saw before, just illustrating the capabilities of the device. You get an image from the anterior cornea to the retina, to the fovea. You see all the important sections of the eye from chamber, from angle to angle, including the lens in very high detail. David already talked about it. Now, the imaging part being solved, the important question for us is, of course, how accurate are we? We need to do topographies. So just to compare the technologies that we have available up to now, where do we stand? Probably the most well-known is the Placido topography that is fairly simple to implement from a technological point, and it is a very fast method. The downside is it only measures the anterior cornea. This method measures directly the curvature, in contrast to something like a Scheimpflug device that measures the distance to the cornea or the elevation. Here we would need to use a slit illumination like in the slit lamp, and then just use a tilted lens to project a image of this slit on the camera. Advantage of the method is that we see anterior and posterior cornea. You also could see the lens, but it's quite slow, and the geometry creates a lot of distortions that need to be corrected. Now we decided that the anterior segment OCT geometry is better for our purpose to get accurate measurements of topographies, since we measure directly along the line of sight. We see all the relevant surfaces at once, and we can combine it very easily with the imaging that is not distorted. Now, to get it accurate enough, of course, speed is a concern. But let's first see what the geometry differences really mean in practice. For instance, if you want to measure the corneal thickness in a Scheimpflug device, you follow the solid red lines. You see that the anterior cornea can be can be imaged in a direct way, but the posterior cornea is being distorted due to refraction. So one needs to do a little bit more math to get the right numbers. While in OCT, you really exactly see the difference between the light paths of the light being reflected by the anterior cornea and the posterior cornea. So that's exactly the number you're looking for. We think it is an advantage to measure along the line of sight. Coming to the speed, to the eye motion, OCT, it measures point by point. It measures a sequence of A scans. So we need to correct for motion that happens during the measurement. And what we do here is we try to cover a significant portion of the cornea in a few milliseconds. So we can freeze motion. It's illustrated by this photography of Harold Edgerton. You really take snapshots that allow you not only to take a single curvature, but it also allows you to take the position of the cornea. And then you can just acquire a lot of those snapshots and align them. That illustrates in more detail how we do it. You get your individual OCT scans. You segment the anterior cornea, the posterior cornea, and the two lens surfaces. Then you align the scans in 3 dimensions. This allows you already to describe the surfaces in great detail. And then it's just a matter of applying some math to get the curvature maps that you might know from a different type of topography system, like a Placido topographer or a Scheimpflug device. And furthermore, in a very straightforward way, it allows to do a 3D representation of the eye and ray tracing calculations. So this is how the device looks. Maybe you've seen it already at our booth. We have 2 prototypes there. It is a very compact device, I would say. It is ergonomic user interface, so there's nothing one needs to adjust. There's actually no joystick involved. It is everything automated. You saw it in David's presentation before. and it's fairly compact. It runs on our IOL calculation software that is in the LensStar. You can integrate it in the network. So everything that you are used to from other Haag-Streit devices, this iSuite software would be compatible to the iStar. Also, nice detail, the screen can position on either side, so if you have limited space, that might be an advantage. To show you a few technical details, on the top left, you see measurements of an artificial cornea. You see this is very reproducible. Actually, it is the standard deviations of these measurements is significantly below 0.1 diopters. The eye length is significantly preciser than 1 micrometer. We combined the thing with a very high resolution optics in the photography part. So you see the vessels in great detail, which allows for surgical planning with high precision. And you see an example of the large OCT scan coverage. It's significantly more than a megapixel of information in a single B scan. We try to get it as simple to use as possible. David already explained it. So there's just a few clicks involved. And with these few clicks, you get all the measurements that the device provides. It measures both eyes, it measures the images, topographies, and the lengths. And all the information is then available over iSuite to other devices as well, to viewing stations and so on. Due to the fact that there is no manual positioning involved, we also believe that the results are going to be much more consistent. It's not dependent on the user, on the operator anymore. The operator can let the device do the measuring part while taking care of the patient. Also, you have the images to confirm correct segmentation. And a nice little detail is if you decide to, the software can maintain itself. So, very networked device. Right now, we just have a software that is specialized on the biometry. So what you have here on top of the LensStar features is the cross-sectional imaging and the topographies of anterior and posterior cornea. In the future, we will, of course, also add very obvious features like a chamber angle analysis. We also plan to provide a means for keratocorneal screening and give you more details on the lens as well. So with this, I want to finish already. The iStar, just to put it right, this is a swept source OCT-based anterior segment analyzer, which also has all the biometry functions included. And it is aimed for high precision quantitative measurements of the refractive surfaces and ocular dimensions. Additionally, it gives you all the imaging in the anterior segment that you wish for, including the visuals. Same being highly automated. That's a key feature of the device. This I want to thank you. That's the team that did the work. And if you have more questions, I'm willing to ask them, to answer them now. Otherwise, visit us at the booth. There you can also see the prototypes in operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucio. Any questions before we move to the next part of the session? Please use the microphone, sir.
Good afternoon. I would like to know if it's capable of epithelium map.
Yeah, we heard this question very often in this conference. We cannot promise you that we can see it. We see it in the images, but we're not sure if we can get a reliable, like precise enough thickness mapping. That is something we need to answer in the next 1 or 2 years. Thank you.
Other questions? Could you just use the microphone? Use the microphones.
Is it able to load or change the IOL constants?
It will have everything that you know from the LensStar. And so, yeah, you can. It actually uses exactly the same software. Additionally, you have the posterior corneal data as well. But otherwise, you can all do the constant optimization as with the LensStar.
Okay. So thank you, Lucio.
Thank you.
Great pleasure in introducing the next speaker, Dr. Adi Abulafia. Adi is currently based in Jerusalem in Israel. He did his anterior segment and cataract fellowship with Graham Barrett in Western Australia, and now he's back in Jerusalem. He has interest in IOL power calculations and toric IOLs. He's going to be talking to us about the new Hill RBF Abulafia Cook toric calculator, which is going to be incorporated into this new iStar machine. Adi?
Okay, thank you, Satish. We heard about the Hill RBF calculator from David Goldblum, and you will hear about it from Warren Hill, and it's a wonderful method. However, we must remember that many of our patients will suffer from corneal astigmatism as well. And this should be ideally addressed with a toric IOL at the time of the cataract surgery. And for that, Haag-Streit had developed a new tool for these patients. It's the Hill RBF toric calculator. Now, we know that toric calculators are a great solution for our patients, but their prediction, the results following their implantations are not always predictable. And we know that one of the reasons for that is that standard keratometry and topography machines tend to yield inaccurate results in assessing the net corneal astigmatism power. So what they do, they measure the anterior cornea, and they assume that there is a fixed ratio between the anterior and the posterior curvatures of the cornea, which is not the case. So Koken is a group evaluated the posterior cornea in a large group of patients using a dual Scheimpflug technology, and what they found was that in most of the posterior corneas were steep along the vertical meridian. So what does it mean? Well, if most posterior corneas are steep vertically and the posterior cornea acts like a negative lens, it means that it creates a net plus power along the horizontal meridian and induces against the rule astigmatism. So in generally speaking, it will reduce the net corneal astigmatism in with the rule eyes and will increase the net corneal astigmatism in against the rule eyes. Another finding was in their study that in with the rule eyes, the more curvature on the front was correlated to more curvature on the back. And for against the rule eyes, they didn't find any correlation between the magnitude of the front and the magnitude of the back. So based on their data, they've developed the Baylor nomogram as a first step solution to address this issue. However, since then, a great deal has been done to refine our understanding about the posterior cornea and how better to incorporate it in our daily calculations. So basically, two approaches have been taken. The first is the use of the mathematical models, and the second is, or the ultimate goal, direct measurements of the posterior cornea. And today I would like to talk about the Abulafia Koch formula. This is a relatively new formula which is based on a regression model. It was developed in order to compensate for the posterior corneal astigmatism effect, and what it actually does, it takes anterior curvature-based corneal measurements and calculates a new net corneal astigmatism with a new magnitude and a new meridian. So we published this at the ESCRS last year, and the purpose of this study was to compare the accuracy of two models of toric IOL calculators with or without the adjustments of the Abulafia Koch formula, and to compare those results to the Barrett toric calculator. So for developing the formula, we used the lens star measurements from the Ein Tal Eye Center in Tel Aviv, Israel, and for validating it, we used the IOL master measurements from the Lion Eye Institute in WA, Australia. For the methods of calculation, we used both the Alcon and the Holiday models with or without the Abulafia Koch formula, and compared those to the Barrett toric calculator, which uses an integrated mathematical model for the posterior cornea. And in order to avoid the noise that can be induced by corneal surgically induced astigmatism and toric IOL misalignment, we used the post-operative corneal measurements and the actual toric IOL axis alignment. Now, bearing in mind that astigmatism is a vector, we tried to figure out what would be the nature of the correlation between the anterior curvature-based corneal measurements and the estimated net corneal astigmatism. And what we found that was a high correlation between the measured corneal astigmatism by the lens star divided in the x and y components of the vector to the estimated net corneal astigmatism. And although we tried several sophisticated models, it seems like a simple linear regression worked the best in our data set. So we calculated the error in predicted residual astigmatism using a multiple-step vector analysis. And what we found was that if you use the Alcon and the Holiday toric calculators and neglecting the posterior corneal effect, you would get, on average, against the rule prediction errors of more than 0.5 diopters. And however, when applying the Abulafia Koch formula, it typically reduced those errors to around 0, and these results were very similar to those which were achieved with the Biometry calculator. So the conclusion of our study was that the prediction of postoperative astigmatic outcomes can be optimized by adjusting standard toric calculators with the Abulafia-Koch formula. Now, I was very happy that Haag-Streit and Warren Hill told me that they are going to use our formula because in the Hill RBF toric calculator, because this is one of my favorite devices. And one of the reasons for that is that you can actually have access to the raw data. Especially it's good for toric IOLs. So you can actually go and look at the measurements, and you can go through each measurements and to evaluate its actual quality. And you can delete bad quality measurements, and then you can look at the standard deviation of the K1, K2, and even the meridian, and this is quite reassuring. Another thing that I like about it, about the Lensstar, is that it has high repeatability in regard to corneal astigmatism measurement, which is essential for accuracy. So in a different study, we compared the differences in corneal astigmatism measurement with the IOL Master 500 and the Lensstar. We took 28 healthy volunteers. We measured their right eye 1 week apart. And in a perfect world, all these dots should be plotted against the 0 mark because we are measuring the same eyes, differences of the same eyes. However, as you can see, this is not the case for both devices. However, in the Lensstar, the variance was significantly lower. And if we look at the differences in the absolute power of astigmatism between these two measurements, we can see that in the Lensstar, more than 96% of the eye were within 0.5 diopters, and as compared to the IOL Master, which had around 78%. Now let's do some calculation. This is one of my patients. She's 59 years old. She has witherable astigmatism and cataract in her left eye. I'm fortunate to have all these measurements for her. And the first thing that I do when I go and do toric calculations is I'm looking at the mirror rings. I want to see that they are not distorted, and they look good here. And I'm verifying that we are dealing with a regular and symmetrical astigmatism. And then it is advisable to follow Warren Hill's methodology and to use primary and secondary supporting instruments in order to determine the steep meridian. And then I repeat the same process for the power difference between the meridians. So let's have a look at the toric calculators. If we would look at the Holiday and the Olson, which is on the Lensstar as well, they don't account for the posterior cornea, and we would probably pick a T5 lens for this lady. However, the Barrett toric calculator and the Hill RBF toric calculator would suggest T4, and this is what I did. She had an uneventful cataract extraction with a T4 lens, final axis just 1 degree off, 93 degrees, post-op refraction plano with a quarter of diopter of witherable astigmatism, and uncorrected visual acuity is 6.6. So, and if we look at the errors in the predicted residual astigmatism, we can see that both the Holiday and the Olson toric calculator had against the rule prediction errors, which were more than 0.5 diopters. However, the Barrett and the Hill RBF toric calculators had the lowest prediction errors, which were close to 0. And this is roughly how it should look like on the toric IOL planner. And thank you.
Thank you, Adi. Any questions? Both your calculator and also the Barrett's calculator is really useful for people who don't have access to shine flick technology, not able to actually measure the posterior cornea. I think it's a very useful device. As more and more data, more and more people use it, I think we'll see a huge benefit for improving the refractive outcome for our toric patients. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last but not the least, speaker for today is Dr. Warren Hill. I don't think he needs any introduction, but I'm obliged to introduce him still. I think Warren has devoted his majority of his career for helping us to understand the mathematics of intraocular power calculations. And I think he has helped each one of us across the world to improve the refractive outcome of patients, both for toric as well as IOL power calculations in general. Warren will be talking to us regarding the new data available from his RBF way of calculating IOL power calculations. I look forward to hearing to that. Warren?
Yeah, thank you, Satish. And Dr. Abulafia, along with Graham Barrett and Doug Koch, is really doing some of the most important work in toric IOLs. If you see a paper with his name on it. That should be the first one you should read in a journal. So in the past, I've talked about, how this method kind of works and how accurate it is. Today, I'm going to do something different. We're going to peel away the curtain, and I'm going to show you exactly how we made this calculator and what it does is what its potential is. And there's some real surprises here, and it's my great pleasure to share some of these surprises with you. And by way of disclosure, Haag-Streit actually paid for all of this research, and I work with them as a consultant. So every time one of us goes into the operating room, what we have is that elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the IOL power selection. Did we get it right? And whether it's with a toric IOL or a multifocal IOL or just a monofocal toric that we're looking to get right, that elephant is always in the room. There have been a number of studies showing the accuracy for benchmark purposes. The Gale study was 55%. Swedish registry was 71%. The Han study was 80. My study with the Haggis formula optimization database of over 250,000 eyes was 78%. This is what 78% looks graphically. And if we're putting in premium quality lenses, we really need to do a whole lot better. So, really, how can we improve the predictability of lens-based surgery? And I would put to you that pattern recognition based on artificial intelligence may be a glimpse into the future of how we can do this a little bit better. Now, the great thing about this is it's a new application of an existing idea. And in mathematics, the fields that Adi and I work in, there are very few original ideas, but what there are is original applications of existing technology. And this is really not dependent on the effective lens position. It's highly flexible and without any calculation bias. It's continuously evolving. In fact, it's a worldwide collaborative effort, and it's entirely data-driven. These are some of the study sites we have in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, North and South America, Asia, India, and Australia. So the participation in this project is very, very wide. And you can see these are some of the people who are working on it. And if you were able to read some of the names, these are some of the best-known people in ophthalmology. So, but the most important participants in this whole project are really going to be all of you, because eventually this is going to be a worldwide collaborative effort that will involve individual users who will be able to submit data to this. And we anticipate having upwards of 100,000, 200,000 cases to bring this to full fruition. So what's the advantage of this over ray tracing and vergence models? Well, we can optimize data solely based on or outcomes rather, solely based on data. And current methods we have just really limit possibilities to things that are already known. And manual methods limit the number of solution options available. And I'll share with you how we get around some of this. It's self-organizing, which means it can take incredibly complex nonlinear relationships that are like a Chinese puzzle and really sort them out. And also it's free of calculation bias. Any one of you who operates on short eyes, long eyes, medium eyes, you all have your favorite formulas of the way you do this. That doesn't apply to this because it's not a vergence formula. So we can do a little exercise right here. This is 1,000 random vectors put inside this little box, but they're not really random. What we've done is we've generated their positions using something called a Manhattan distance generator. And those of you who work in mathematics knows that there's two types of distances. There's a Euclidean distance as the bird flies, then there's also a Manhattan distance. So think about the city of Manhattan, which has blocks like little squares, and if you were a taxi cab driver, you would be driving along a vertical and horizontal road. So if we look at the Manhattan distance, this is the Manhattan distance between these 2 points, and this would be the Euclidean distance, just a distance as a crow flies. So what we've done is we've added a level of complexity to all of these dots, and so we're gonna make them organized in terms of X and Y, and we're gonna ask an artificial intelligence model to sort this out. Okay, take this crazy random collection of dots, and let's see if we can find the internal organization. Not only that, we're going to put some limits, and I'm going to say, I'm only going to give you 5,000 tries to get this. And with today's scary fast computers, we can do that. So here's 40 cycles, not very good. Here's 120 cycles, here's 500 cycles. By the time we get to 5,000 cycles, we've actually been able to sort out the internal organization of a seemingly chaotic mess and know that these are Manhattan distances. So just for a moment, consider the power of this technology in terms of coming up with a lens power, and it almost just takes your breath away. So I'm going to share with you how we put this calculator together and the possibilities that it opens up for us. And you can see why we're very excited at Haag-Streit about this. So the first thing we have to do is figure out, what do we use? And we came up with 13 variables, which included some odd things like pupil size, anterior corneal spherical aberration at a 6mm aperture, patient's age, ethnicity, their gender. And we do a Darwinian evolutionary modeling process called a genetic algorithm. We begin with 13 possibilities, and we modify some basic models in a semi-random fashion. We put aside the best candidate models and keep going through this over and over again. And with a 500-core computer, you can do this very, very fast until you can't get any improvement. So we have the computer pick for us the best models. And you would think, well, if you have 13 different factors, why not use all 13? Well, it turns out in artificial intelligence, the more input you give it, the more it looks like the database. So what we want is we want this to think for itself. And so we came up with, for a given IOL power, the postoperative spherical equivalent, axial length, central corneal power, and ACD had the best models. And things like lens thickness didn't even show up except in the high hyperope, and so it was kind of a surprise. The other thing is we need to independently validate this, so we set aside 20% of the cases and then ran things again just to confirm things. And we had a series of criteria, and these models gave us the best approach. And this is very similar to natural selection in biology, and it universally outperforms all manual methods because it can come up with solutions that you never would have thought of. And here's an example. This is a spacecraft antenna from the NASA ST-5 spacecrafts, and these are like little discs that NASA puts into space. And this is the antenna design that a Darwinian evolutionary modeling process came up with. Normally, a vertical antenna is just a straight single radiator, but they wanted it to have certain characteristics in terms of bandwidth and radiation pattern. So the people at NASA just put it through this same process, doing an iterative process with modeling one model after the other, and they came up with this. And this outperforms every single manually developed model there is. So the advantage of this is that it gives us the opportunity to explore possibilities that we never could have considered. If, for example, if you have 13 different factors and the order matters, that's 6,277,000 possibilities. We could never sit down with pen and paper and come up with all of that on our own. Okay, so here's how we make the calculator. We have our data, and then we organize it. We figured out what factors we're going to use. We apply this to an artificial intelligence model. In this case, we're using radial basis function, activation function, but we could use polynomial models, stochastic models, Gaussian process models. There are a lot of things we can do with our computer systems. We calculate the difference between what we know to be the correct answer, what we've observed, and what we're getting. We ingest some internal mathematical weights, and then we run this thing through a backward propagation process, and then we just keep doing this over and over and over again until the accuracy doesn't improve. And what comes out the other end is a calculator with a series of boundary models, and I'll show you how that works. So when Doug Koch and Lee Wong and I first began doing this about 7 years ago, the first thing we discovered is there's no calculation bias to this whatsoever. So again, we all have the formulas we like for short eyes, long eyes, medium eyes. It doesn't matter with this. This is just pattern recognition. So a lot of what we know about options for calculation formulas really don't apply here. And we can take a cloud of data and we can turn it into a straight line with some of the algorithms that we use. Now, a new tool that we've added to this that's a totally normal thing for engineering, but is unknown in ophthalmology, is boundary models, where we can take 6 pairwise boundary models and tell the user if it's going to be accurate at a certain level. So this is the pairwise boundary model for central corneal power against axial length. Everything within the blue area, if your data point falls in that area, we can tell you what the accuracy is going to be. When we normally do cataract surgery, what we do is we put the lens in grandma's eye, and then 3 weeks later we found out if we got it right. Here we have an idea what it's going to be before surgery, and if it's something very unusual, we can have that conversation with the patient. If you tell the patient beforehand, it's not your fault. If the patient finds out afterwards, it belongs to you. So this is another tool that we use. So I'll show you how the boundary models work. Remember, a regression algorithm works in 2 dimensions, like this, and we have a cloud of data, and we run a regression line through it's a collection of data. But here we're working in 6 dimensions, so it's a lot more sophisticated. So here we have 3,400 eyes. Here's a 26 millimeter eye with Ks, about 44 diopters, 3.25 millimeters for the ACD. And you can see that every single one of the green dots falls within the boundary model. So this is an inbound calculation. This is a pretty normal eye. But let's do the same calculation with something that's a little bit more different. Here's a long eye with very, very steep Ks, which is pretty unusual. And we're going to have some a very shallow anterior chamber depth. This is an out-of-bounds calculation. But watch what happens when we increase the amount of data. We're going to go to 12,400 eyes. We're going to look at the same numbers, a long eye, steep Ks, but now we've converted that to an inbounds calculation. Here's shallow anterior chamber depth. Now we've converted that to an inbounds calculation by just having more data points. So the idea is that the more data we have, the broader the depth and accuracy of the calculation method that we have. This is the first prospective study done for the first version of this. You can see a broad range of IOL powers, axial lengths, anterior chamber depth, central corneal power. And then here's what we came up with as far as our outcomes. This is just the very first version, and this was a prospective study done by Mike Snyder, Bobby Osher's partner, Steve Scoper, who individually does 3,500 cataracts a year, and my practice. And we got some pretty big numbers. And what really impressed us was the outcomes for the high hyperope. There are now 3 studies that show that this method probably works better for the high hyperope than anybody else. This is a study that was presented at ESCRS by a group that I don't even know, but if you look at what they got for their half diopter accuracy, it's pretty much exactly the same as the prospective study. How many of here would like to have 92% of your patients within half a diopter? I can tell you it's a real thrill, and it really does work. So this is independent validation. This is the new version. I made this available this week. It's on our website, and you can see the range of IOL powers, axial lengths is really quite enormous. And so what we've done is we've increased the depth and the breadth of the calculation method. This is Steve Scoper's retrospective study. We haven't done a prospective study yet because this is brand new, but what we're seeing is incremental improvements over the first version, which is pretty much exactly what you would expect to see. Now, also, one of the complaints that we had about the original version is we sampled the artificial intelligence model at Plano because we just didn't have enough data to do anything else. Now we have over 12,000 cases, and if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that I'm changing the target spherical equivalent, and now the calculated power is changing as well. So as the number of cases increases, the options for this increase as well. We've enhanced the boundary model by more than 7,000 cases for normal eyes, and for the extreme axial myope, we now go down to -5 diopters, and we've expanded the accuracy range for the hyperope. So what was really good for the axial hyperope is now going to be even better with the addition of over 1,000 exceptionally short eyes from our beta test sites. Now here's where things get really interesting. Remember, there's often not new thinking, but there are new applications to existing ideas. Are all eyes from all ethnic groups the same? It turns out they aren't. And the Chinese have been complaining about this to us for a long time, because all the formulas we use are optimized against what? European eyes. The Chinese eye has a somewhat smaller anterior segment. It's a little bit more crowded. The white to white's different. And the Chinese really don't like the formulas they have that we've been giving them. They like to use SRK2 and SRKT. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's just a lack of sophistication. No, it turns out these formulas work better for these eyes. So we have a study undergoing right now with some of the largest facilities in China to create an artificial intelligence model, whereas before we had so much noise in the process, we couldn't sort out the differences. Now we have the sensitivity and sophistication to actually put together a calculation model for the Chinese, and they're very, very enthusiastic about it. So we now have the participation of the Ayer Hospital Group, which is the largest hospital group in mainland China. And these are some of our investigators, including some people that you already know, some of the most well-known people in Singapore and also John Chang in Hong Kong. So I think this has the potential to be something transformative for this ethnic subgroup. So right now, ophthalmology is experiencing a conversion of technologies and accuracy. We have Vergence formulas, we have artificial intelligence, we have intraoperative aberrometry, we have ray tracing. And what we're starting to see is when people really take their time, make sure the measurements are correct, we're getting a convergence of around 90% for the half diopter accuracy. What artificial intelligence brings to this is enhanced sensitivity over more traditional methods, and it's also much more flexible. And I think for many different directions, the future of IOL power calculations is very, very bright. So here's where we started out at 78%, which is a very, very common number for most ophthalmologists. This is where we are with artificial intelligence, and the goal of this project is nothing less than having all of us not have to worry about the spherical equivalent again. And that elephant in the room may eventually slowly disappear, and we can turn our attention to other things. Thank you.
Warren, thank you for this fascinating talk. I think we have pretty much come to the end of the symposium. Just one quick question. Do you think still the Achilles heel is all these post-refractive patients when they come in for cataract surgery?
Yeah, and I get asked this question all the time. What's the problem with a post-refractive patient is measuring the cornea. And if you've got somebody who's with 8 diopters of myopic LASIK, there's not a machine in the world that can measure these corneas. So we need the measurement technology, and then we can apply this. But right now, we can't measure these corneas. That's our biggest problem. Thank you all very much.
Any questions?
One more.
Yeah. Just take one final one.
So the OCT-based measurement, would it have a true corneal power better than the current methods then?
It depends on what method they finally decide on, but I think the new iStar is going to be OCT based for everything, right?
So
And that'll be
would it give more accurate measurement of the corneal power than?
Theoretically, it should be, but this is brand new, evolving technology, and we haven't even done the studies yet. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of the meeting. Thank you.